So good morning, everyone. I can see that lots of people are joining now. So we're just going to hold fire just a minute or two to give everyone an opportunity to join, and then we will start. So if you're just joining us now, feel free to use the chat function, pop in where you're from. It's always really lovely to see where all our attendees are joining from today. Oh, I can see some familiar faces. Good morning. So we're just going to hold fire just a couple of minutes and give everyone an opportunity to join. So if you're just joining us, good morning, welcome. Please do pop in the chat and let us know where you're from. Oh, fantastic. We've got someone joining us from Sydney, Australia. Good morning. That's very exciting. I'm assuming you're probably experiencing slightly better weather than we are right now, but I could be wrong.
I think it's a good evening, Kate.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's good evening. Oh, yes, of course. Oh, joining from Barcelona. Amazing. Good morning. So we'll hold fire just one more minute, giving everyone an opportunity to join. Oh, sunny Edinburgh. That sounds nice. Good morning. It's always lovely to hear about these wonderful locations that hopefully at some point we'll all be able to go to. So just 30 seconds more, giving everyone an opportunity to join.
I think there's a happy birthday there for Lauren.
Oh, happy birthday, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're having a wonderful celebratory walk later, or hopefully a nice meal, cooking something nice. Excellent. Okay, I think we'll just make a start then. Well, firstly, a huge welcome and thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. This is the South East and Eastern Women Ed co-region event celebrating and marking International Women's Day. I am absolutely delighted to be able to work with some amazing speakers today in pulling this event together. And it gives me great pleasure to be able to mark the importance of International Women's Day on behalf of the movement Women Ed. Just going to share my screen and introduce some of the individuals that actually will be speaking today. So I'm just going to pop my screen open now. Perfect. So my name's Kate and I am assistant head teacher at a school in Buckinghamshire in Little Chalfont called Dr. Chalmers High School, but I'm also one of the regional leads for the South Eastern Network of Women Ed. And joining me today, we also have Bianca. Bianca, do you want to say hello?
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Bianca Greenhouch. I'm a head teacher, new head teacher, although not so new, so I probably can't keep saying that. And at the Gatwick School in Crawley, and I'm also a co-network lead with the lovely Cheryl in Sussex.
Brilliant, thanks Bianca. Now, Women Ed as a movement. Some of you may not be familiar with the work of the movement, but it is an incredible grassroots movement that essentially is centred on a number of core values. But our work is all designed to provide a platform to empower, to support, and to bring women and other allies and supporters of our work together to give them a voice and to help them when it comes to instigating change. Now, as a network, as a group of individuals, we centre our work on these core values. And as you can see, it's about connection, it's about communication, but ultimately it is, in fact, about change. When we think about some of the work of the network, we host events. So we host events like today's webinar, but in essence, we like to, when obviously we're in slightly less strange times, actually meet together. We support each other through sharing of messages about hope, about guidance. And one of the things that I personally, and I know lots of others, really like about this movement is we don't just talk about diversity, we really live it. And as you can see from the speakers today, from the topics that our speakers will be talking about, we really do celebrate this idea of not just the visible, but the hidden characteristics that make our community, our speakers, unique but amazing. And that's really what we are. We are a community. Now, over the past 2 years, I've been really proud to stand side by side with the most amazing group of women. I'm sure that Bianca will verify, but we have laughed together, we have cried together. And one of the things that I feel that we've built is more than just a friendship. The friendship has been amazing, but we've actually been able to build something even more exciting. And that is a network for change. And that very much links with the focus of today's event. We've overcome a whole range of barriers, and Bianca will talk a little bit about the geography in a moment, but we've lifted each other up. We have empowered each other. And as empowered women, we've looked to then connect with others and to extend that level of support. Whether it's a coaching conversation, the sharing of resources, we've been each other's listening ear, voice of reason, and probably most importantly, each other's cheerleader. Now, today's webinar is, I guess, a reflection of those core values of Women Ed and the things that we stand for. And you'll hear from some amazing supporters of that community. But I would also like to take a moment just to say that this event and the fact that it's been brought to life was really the result of a huge amount of work behind the scenes by people that you won't see on camera today. And to each of those individuals that has worked tirelessly to help support Bianca and I in bringing this to life, I really genuinely thank you for the time and support that you've put in. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from each of our speakers today on this topic of choosing to challenge in order to instigate change. I'm going to share my screen again so we can just get a real sense actually of the geography of that southeastern and eastern region, because it's really quite impressive actually when you take a step back and see just where we're all coming from today. So I'm going to go back onto my slide and then I'll hand over to Bianca.
Thank you, Kate. So where are we? If you have a look at the map, you will see Women Ed Eastern and Women Ed Southeast are spread far and wide across our little corner of the world. Now, if we zoom into the Women Ed Southeast region, you will actually see, we moved from Oxford over to Canterbury, Basingstoke, and although my school is in Crawley, I actually live in Brighton and Hove. So if we were to mark that, that would you'd see the vastness there. Moving over to Women Ed Eastern. And I think it's the same with both areas, really, that if we were to travel to meet, you would be looking over 2 hours travel time. And we know that that's quite a challenge when we are working our busy day jobs, as well as managing our life outside of that too. So although we look forward to face-to-face, and being able to move back to that, I think there really is a place for this virtual platform to enable us to meet others as far-reaching as Australia, as we have today, and Barcelona and other parts of the world. So I'm just going to introduce our speakers for today. I think there's a next slide for there. I'm not going to go through more because I know they're going to be introduced to you all later. Jo's not able to join us. Unfortunately, she's unwell today. So Sue's going to step in and speak to us to continue to wave the flag for our business leaders. And we wish Jo a speedy recovery.
Fantastic. I'm just going to hand over to Sue and Leanne, who are going to introduce something that we're going to repeatedly come back to, hopefully throughout today's event. So Sue and Leanne, are you happy to talk about this for us?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This slide here is being used across all of the Women Ed events this weekend going on in all our different regions and around the world. We're going to pause throughout our event today to give you the opportunity to think about what the barriers to women leading in education are. We're not going to use the Mentee, are we, today, Leanne? We're just going to use the chat. So if you want to throw in what you think some of the barriers are to women leading in education into the chat, it'll just give us some idea of what we can focus on and how we can break down some of those barriers for us during this coming year.
Perfect. Thank you, Sue. I mean, by all means, if you did want to contribute to the wider network and the discussion surrounding this question, you'd be more than welcome to use the code. There are all sorts of amazing events going on in the next few days and weeks, hosted by Women Ed and various networks across the world. And everyone's being asked this same question. So please, please, as Sue said, do share your ideas with us here today so we can pick up on them and start to think about them, and most importantly, act and challenge them. But also please do contribute to the wider discussion, and feel free to go to the website to enter the code and to share your thoughts there. And hopefully our global strategic leads will then be able to collate together some really valuable information. Right. It gives me huge pleasure to be able to introduce our first speaker today, Teesdee. And I was first introduced to this impressive and empowered lady by one of our governors at school. And I really do hope that we've struck up a friendship here. I could honestly sit and listen to the stories, to the anecdotes, and to the advice and guidance really by this individual for hours on end. Teesdee is going to be talking a little bit about this idea of pushing past possible. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over, stop sharing, and give the mic to Teesdee.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate, and good day to everyone, wherever you are in the UK and wherever you are in the world. I feel really honored to be with all of you here today. And I'm going to just share my story with you, which I hope will be useful, and you'll be able, even if it's just one thing that you take from it, that you are able to take something from it. My story will be in 3 parts. The first part will be a bit about my life growing up. The second bit will be about challenging myself physically and mentally. And finally, leading myself and others in my professional life. As Kate already said, the title of my story is Push Past Possible. Part 1, my life growing up. Watinta bafazi, watinti mbogodo. That is a Xhosa phrase, meaning you strike a woman, you strike a rock. On August 9th in 1956, women in South Africa chanted this as they marched and protested in their struggle against racial discrimination in South Africa. This is one of the slogans that I grew up with as a young girl. I grew up with a strong, powerful mother that was a political activist whose life's purpose was fighting racial discrimination and other human rights abuses. I grew up as a refugee moving from one country to another. I was born in Nigeria, moved to Botswana, then Zimbabwe, Norway, the UK, and finally to South Africa in 1994, when it was free. My mother used to say to me as we lived in constant fear of our lives, they can take everything from you, but no one can take away your education. I had the privilege of going to good schools by applying for and attaining scholarships from the UN and other agencies at the time. I learned the value of hard work and education from a young age. When I was 13 years old, we lived in Botswana, and in June 1985, there was a raid by the South African Defence Force where 12 people were killed. Although my mother was on the hit list, we survived the raid. The morning after the raid, we left home and I went to school, never to return to my home again. We had to look for shelter every night. We lost our home overnight and were later deported to Zimbabwe. However, true to my mother's teachings, my education and knowledge went with me. Through my felt experience that I've just described, I learned to be resilient. I learned about humanity from those that gave us shelter, and I learned about discrimination. I realized that my education, learning, and development did not only happen at school. It happened at home, it happened through travel, and it happened through my life experiences. I chose to value education, learning, and development. So the second part of my story that I will tell you about is a physical and mental challenge that I embarked on in 2010 and completed in 2011. In 2010, I decided to challenge myself to do a full Ironman. So my friends and those that know me know that I often put myself through some of these grueling challenges. I was curious and wanted to explore what I could do through pushing my mind, body, and heart. I was the first Black woman in South Africa at the time to complete an Ironman, which for those of you who don't know, involves a 3.8 kilometer, which is 2.4 mile swim, 180 kilometer cycle, which is 114 miles, and a 42.2 kilometer run, 26.2 miles, a full marathon. When I competed in this, I was the last one out of the water. Swimming had been my nemesis. It took me 2 hours and the cutoff is 2 hours, 20 minutes. I then got on the bike and managed to overtake a few that had left me in the water. That took me 7 hours, 30 minutes. Finally, the marathon took me 5 hours, 30 minutes. And I passed a few others on the way, and indeed some did not finish. It was tough. And there were moments where I wanted to give up. I kept on chanting in my head, I will persist till I succeed. I will persist till I succeed. I learned through this that I had to run my own race. As women, we stand on the shoulders of many who have gone before us. I've given you the example of my mother, and there are yet many more examples. We have to choose to persist till we succeed. The challenge of gender equality is like a full Ironman or a marathon. It is not a sprint. So the last part of my story that I'm going to share with you relates to my professional life. So I'm a clinical psychologist by background and work in the field of leadership development and organizational development, change and executive coaching as a consultant. I came to the UK as a single mother to a 13-year-old son at that time to work at Ashridge Executive Education. In the work that I do, I work with leaders across the globe in various industries. And whilst the face of leaders in organizations is slowly changing, leadership roles in organizations are still predominantly held by men. So I'm going to just tell you a short story of something that happened to me whilst I was at Ashridge. And there was a client that needed some work to be done. And one of my colleagues heard from the client that they wanted a male gray-headed person to do the work. And I think that they associated experience and knowledge with being male and gray-headed. So my colleague said to me, actually, Tsidi, I think you could be able to do this work because you have the expertise. So in my first meeting with the client, I asked them what they needed. And also in my contracting with them, said to them that I realized that I was not the gray-headed male they were looking for. Rather, I was probably a younger female, Black, with dreadlocks person. However, in our conversation, realized that actually I could meet the need with my expertise that I had. So we later developed a good relationship and I delivered the work. I think as female leaders, and this has even been accentuated even more during the pandemic, whether single, with or without children, we have multiple roles to fulfill, prejudices and other challenges to overcome. In order to overcome these challenges, I choose to challenge myself to leave things better than I found them. I choose to challenge myself and you to push past possible. Thank you for listening to me today.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Tidi. And I love the message there about empowerment and about running your own race. And I think that is so, so important. But genuinely, thank you for your time today. It's hugely appreciated. Moving on then to our next speakers, I'm going to hand over to Bianca.
I'm only going to talk to you briefly this morning because this is a share the mic moment, and Janine is the person that you will be hearing from. But what I'm going to talk about in brief is not a final destination, but part of my journey. Now, we're talking about the complexities of allyship, and I'm not going to unpick what allyship means because Janine is going to do that later. But I am going to start, certainly not at the beginning of my journey, but at a point in my journey, and that is the death of George Floyd, because that felt like a new awakening. I wanted to stand in solidarity with my Black and brown friends and colleagues and actively challenge and change institutional racism and unconscious bias in our spaces. Now, part of that discussion was allyship. Creating and the idea that because of my white privilege that I could, as a white woman, could create spaces for my Black and brown colleagues and friends to create a space to give voice. Now, I was almost at that point gung-ho about it, and I believe for all of the right reasons. But more recently, I've been asking myself, who am I to decide who should be heard? Who am I to decide who that space is created for? And asking Janine to talk today prompted me to ask myself the question, by doing this, by selecting, am I not at risk of perpetuating white saviour? Now, I haven't got lots of time to unpick that at the moment, but the conversation at the beginning of my renewed desire to learn, to research and to understand, there was lots of discussion around discomfort, the discomfort of doing the work. Now, this is a choice for me. As a white woman, I choose to do the work. And what I've been reflecting on, really, this discomfort is nothing compared to the discomfort of prejudice, unwanted prejudice that my friends, my colleagues have experienced. and that receive it through overt and microaggressions. And who can ever be prepared for that? And again, doing the work, that I'm reflecting on that term itself, because that feels a little bit like a project. And that sort of links back to my thoughts and feelings around the work and linking back to white saviour. Now, this only scratches the surface of how I'm feeling and the thoughts that I'm going through at this present time. And like I say, it's part of a journey. So I'm sitting with that. That is part of the complexity of allyship. But I do recall when I heard Angela Brown speak at one of our first Women Ed South East events. Now, there were lots of messages that she shared with us. But one of them that I took from that was that she never really felt like she belonged when she was at school. Now, I'm a head teacher, and I'm at the starting point of my career as a head teacher. But that is my starting point. I want to affect change, and I want to affect change in the small corner of the world that I sit. And on a personal and a professional level, there is still an awful lot for me to unpick. But one thing I do know is staying silent is not an option. Now, I'm really honoured and privileged to be part of Women Ed, and I'm really honoured and privileged to have Janine as my friend, who I am now going to hand over to.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Am I unmuted? I hope so. I hope you can hear me. Thanks for that introduction. You can hear me, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Superb. Thanks for that introduction. The nerves are coursing through my veins like fire right now. I'm being more than 10% braver. And it's a real privilege to be able to share my story with you today and to think about the complexities of that term allyship, which is a new one on me. I'm hoping that you can see my screen, a title screen. Today, very briefly, I'd like to introduce myself and add another voice to the Women's Ed narrative. And I want to think about this term allyship and how it somehow makes me feel a little bit something. I wanted to explore it. What is it? What part can we or I play in it? What are the impacts? What have been the impacts on me when I've received it, when I've attempted to deliver it? What are the challenges and successes involved in that? And I also want to reflect briefly on how the changing global narrative has brought this term to the fore, I guess. So onward. I thought I'd start with a definition to get started, a trustworthy definition from Merriam-Webster, which I believe was established in the 1800s. Allyship, the state or condition of being an ally. Great. A supportive association with another person or group. Why wouldn't we choose to be involved in that? However, if prior to becoming a teacher, my young aspirational self leaving university in 2001, somebody had said to me, allyship means the supportive association with members of a marginalised or mistreated group to which one does not belong. Even then, I would have felt some considerable discomfort in that definition. What if the marginalised don't want my involvement? What if I'm perceived as marginalised or mistreated when I feel like I am not? So just to get us started, let's think about what this term allyship means. I'm just going to leave that there for a moment because, friends, it wasn't what I was expecting. Now, a brief bit of history about me. I didn't want to become a teacher. That wasn't my journey. That wasn't my plan. But here we are. Just a brief intro into where it all began. I've put here, assimilate to succeed, question mark. a women's ed event that I attended, Angela Brown was speaking, and she spoke about a desire to assimilate, a subconscious one, an unconscious one. And I absolutely connected with that. A bit of background, I am the first generation of Jamaican migrants, proudly. And the message in our household from as early as I can remember was, if you are going to succeed in this country, you must assimilate. Do not stick your head above the parapet. Do not engage in behaviors that will breathe life into negative stereotypes. Get on. For better or worse, that was the message in our household. So I lived it, I wore it, I breathed it, I accepted it. I was raised in Kent in the Medway towns, so a big shout out to anyone who might be in that area. I went to an independent primary school, which then led to a selective all-girls grammar school secondary experience, which was wonderful. I guess, and this might be a bit controversial, had a traditional middle-class educational trajectory. That was the aim, that was the goal, that's what assimilation in my mum's eyes looked like. I eventually went on to the University of Leicester to study English literature, all the while batting off questions like, well, what are you going to do with that? You're going to be a teacher? With absolutely not, I have no desire to do that. Instead, I was hoping to become some kind of hybrid between Moira Stewart and Kate Adie, the career in journalism. As it was, I ended up working for QVC, the shopping channel, so I was some way off there. But I digress, during this time, my mum became a foster carer. And I was able at first hand to start experiencing what the impact of marginalisation is on lives, and deprivation on lives. And so I decided, a real calling, that I wanted to work with young people, went to work for Sure Start for a bit, then bit the bullet and became an English teacher. So that's my story. Just to brighten up your morning, there's a heritage photo there of me as a brand new teacher, which I found the other day. In the interest of sticking with the hashtag choose to challenge, I chose to challenge myself by going to work in an inner city Leicester school that was diverse and multicultural and wonderful, and all of the acronyms. And I just want to stop and reflect for a moment on how I did not realize how important having allies, mentors, advocates, activists around us is in our life journeys, but particularly in my teaching journey. So going back to this idea of interpreting the term allyship, ally, we all know what that word means. It's someone who helps, somebody who supports, somebody who encourages someone else. And I would certainly not be sitting here engaged in the 15th year of my teaching career if I didn't have allies around me from the get-go. If I didn't have people around me that provided assistance and support in what is an ongoing effort, the ongoing effort of education, often the struggle. I wasn't prepared as a new teacher for that struggle. I had plenty of allies around me, colleagues, co-workers, friends, but I needed, and I didn't realize this, but I needed allies around me to help me in what became the hugest struggle ever with this context that I had put myself in. I wasn't prepared for the emotional and psychological impacts, difficulties of working in schools, and also the physical, the tiredness. I couldn't get through. Within 2.5 years, I had to take a break. I had incredible burnout. I'd like you to reflect on the synonym when I looked up ally, accomplice, I had accomplices in this ongoing struggle. I had leaders who felt that their encouragement and support and help was helpful. In truth, it wasn't. Can we stop for a minute and reflect on what help and support we're thinking about allyship? What does help and support look like? How do we support the people around us? Do we champion them? And if so, is that actually supportive at that point, whatever point they're sat in? Do we advocate? What I needed was an ally or allies around me that protected me from my own thoughts, from my own negative, I guess, experiences and behaviours. So I ended up having 6 months, without turning this into a therapist's gadget, I ended up having 6 months off. And here's where allyship really did work for me. A new head teacher arrived and recognised that what I needed was protection. I was able to take a break and eventually get back to being the high quality teacher that I wanted to be. That involved some projects that I am to this day very proud of, that you can see there. I ended up in this moment of empowerment, this few years of empowerment, capable of delivering teaching and learning speeches across Leicester City. I then was able to start being an ally myself to the young people that I taught. Wikipedia, that all hallowed reference area, says allyship is the practice of emphasizing social justice and inclusion and advancing the interests of marginalised outgroups. I feel like as a teacher, now I look back on it, I was a member of the in-group, I am. I have power. I don't like that word, it's too much, but in this moment of empowerment for me, I was able to advocate for all young people that I came in touch with, but in particular, Black and mixed race young people in the communities that I was working in. I was a founder member of a group called the Phoenix Agenda, which was supporting African heritage students to reach their potential. I even became, for a very short time, an educational consultant on BBC Radio Leicester. However, what do we do if in our quest to become allies, the marginalised reject and don't want our allyship? I speak to the leaders amongst us listening in today. I'm just going to talk very quickly about the dangers involved in presuming and perhaps not thinking carefully about how we choose to ally ourselves with others. I moved from Leicester to Brighton. I wanted to be by the sea. I have no idea why, so I still cannot swim despite many lessons. However, it's a wonderful place down here. And when I got down here, I immediately continued my quest to help what I perceived to be the oppressed. I started to champion and advocate the causes of all of the young people that I taught, but in particular, the small number of Black kids that were around me, very small number. And they did not want it. I wasn't prepared for that. They didn't want my allyship. They didn't want me championing the causes, highlighting statistics related to education. They didn't want those things. It culminated in a phone call from one of their moms saying, we appreciate what you're doing and we understand why, but they don't like it. And I also, another quick anecdote before I leave you is, I have also been subject to allyship, which often is a wonderful thing, but sometimes, particularly with today's changing global narrative, where as someone who has sought to assimilate, not stick their head above the parapet, not used to talking about my identity, and I was scared to do that and became reluctant to do that. I've recently experienced what it's like to feel on the other side of allyship that is uncomfortable. I suppose that's culminated in people presuming that as a Black woman that I will immediately be able to connect, immediately be excited about being the voice of or speaking on behalf of. And that hasn't always been the case, definitely hasn't recently, as I struggle to identify my own feelings on these things. Lots of writing here, but I just want to leave you to think about what sort of ally you want to be, how you feel about this topic. It says here that being an ally is being able to listen and shine a spotlight on those whose voices are often unheard, recognizing your own privilege and power and using that to lift others up, being aware of implicit biases that you might have, supporting groups you're allying by letting them speak for themselves if they want to. I'm not expecting special recognition. Weirdly, I stole this definition from a marketing blog, which is a reminder that we should be cautious. That the term is a nebulous one. I feel like I've been a bit waffly, but thank you very, very much for listening to me and my story, and wishing you all the best Saturdays.
That was amazing, Janine. Thank you so, so much. I think there's such a richness to your presentation. You know, certainly I'm taking away a need for reflection, for understanding, for awareness, but also not just to listen, but to really hear what people are saying and sharing, and then from that, then deciding on an appropriate course of action in your role as an ally. But I think it's so important. Thank you for challenging us today in terms of our understanding and to tackling head on those complexities associated with the semantics of allyship. Just fabulous. Thank you so, so much. Right, I'm going to hand back now to Sue and Leanne, who are going to remind us about our mentee today. So I will reshare the slide.
Thank you, Kate. That's great. Wow, what an amazing couple of speakers we've had so far, and so many more left to come this morning. So thank you everyone for joining us. Please do keep sharing your thoughts on what the barriers are to women leading in education at the moment. I'll share the link again in the chat and that code as well. Also, if you've got any questions for our speakers, please do put those in the chat. We did have one come through from Flick asking if any of our speakers deliver assemblies or any PSHC sessions, and if so, how we can go about organising them. So CD and Janine, do you want to offer your services if you feel able?
I mean, you know, get in touch. We can see what we can do. I do teach in school. I'm a teacher at a specialist boys' school at the moment in Sussex, but I'm always happy to help if you think I can. Tweet me. Is that what we do?
That sounds great. Thank you, Janine. I'll pop your Twitter handle in the chat as well, just so that people can contact you. Thank you very, very much.
I think for me too, Flick, I don't do it right now, but I would be quite happy to, if you know, if you wanted me to. So absolutely, and I think I can be contacted on my LinkedIn handle. Yeah. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, TC. If you're happy to put your LinkedIn handle just to remind our community in the chat, that would be amazing. And equally, as we go through today's session, if anyone else would like to share with our attendees their Twitter handle or a point of contact for any sort of follow-up that you might feel comfortable with, that's really encouraged. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to hand over to Kerry now, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce Leslie Monroe as our next speaker. I can't quite remember the exact date, even though I am a historian, when I met Leslie. And I think Leslie was in my second cohort of PGCE history teachers at Canterbury Christchurch University. And Leslie had been absolutely 10% braver, even though 10% braver wasn't invented then. Women Ed was just still a twinkle in somebody's eye. But Leslie and I struck up a relationship I was her teacher as she was becoming a teacher. And I have watched with awe and wonder as Leslie's career progressed. And I'm not going to say any more because this is Leslie's space and Leslie's story. But it is a powerful story and one that we need to hear and reflect upon. Over to Leslie.
Thank you, Kerry. I hope you can all hear me okay. I hope I'm unmuted okay. As Kerry said, I went into teaching at the age of 41, did my PGCE then. And this is about, I want to speak about why teachers and leaders, good teachers and good leaders, are leading the profession. And I'm going to do that through my own exit from the teaching profession. So as I say, I started teaching at 41. Went to back to university. I had a small family, and I was very lucky to get a job in my first placement school, large school of 2,300 students. I was a history teacher for 4 years, became head of department, lead practitioner. I absolutely loved it. Loved working at that school, loved the students, loved the colleagues. But after 12 years, I thought, well, maybe it's time to have a change, to really challenge myself. So having been very comfortable in that school, I went to work in a much smaller school of less than 500 students that was in special measures. I felt here I could maybe make a difference and I would be really challenging myself and coming out of my comfort zone. So at the interview, I asked the head teacher if what they thought about their senior leadership team, did they listen? And the answer was no, this is a dictatorship. It needs to be a dictatorship because we need to go from special measures to good and then outstanding. And that was the rationale. So I did join the school. I really felt I could make a difference there. I started as lead practitioner and a lead teacher of humanities. And within a few months, I was head of faculty for teaching and learning, providing the CPD, supporting my head of department, still lead teacher, still lead practitioner, and teaching nearly all of the history classes, including all of the exam groups for history. But I loved it. It was a real challenge. I felt I was making a difference. The students got the best results in history that they'd had for years at that school. So I really felt we were going places. Then the deputy head unfortunately became sick and left. And heads of faculty were invited to morning briefings as well as senior leadership meetings after school that we'd already been attending. And these meetings morning briefings were just hideous. We were harangued if we didn't do things for the school without, by taking our own initiative. If we did take our own initiative, then we were asked why we hadn't asked permission. If you offered a suggestion that didn't fit, you were belittled in front of your colleagues, and they're pretty miserable affairs, to be honest. But, we kept going. And then in beginning my third year, I think I was asked to take on a form group as well as my other role. So I was asked to take year 11. And some quite challenging students in there, but I thought, that's okay, you're good with those students, Leslie, it'll be fine. So I was now doing UCAS applications with my tutees and teaching PSHE to them in the mornings, a space that I'd often use to support my heads of department, speak to students, set cover if I needed to. My time was really, really squeezed now. Had 8 non-contacts a fortnight where I helped my one-to-ones with my HODs, did my learning walks, book checks, planned the CPD, plan for my lessons and my marking. But, I did ask not to be given the group, but was told, well, it's short term. It'll only be for short term until we grow as a school. But I felt it was a little bit of a straw too far. But I kept going. All the plates were spinning. I didn't drop anything. Everything kept going. However, I wasn't really coping. I got ocular shingles. and was quite unwell. So I was signed off for a fortnight because it was contagious. School were very caring, called me to see how I was and would I like my marking brought home. I said no, I didn't really think I was well enough for that. But the second week I had the same call. How are you? Would you like your work dropped off? And I said no, but I didn't really want to have that. So after 2 weeks, I felt I really needed to go back. And school were good. I went back on a 2-week phased return, but it was really quite apparent quite quickly that I really wasn't well. I was extremely tired. It's a very debilitating illness if anybody's had shingles. So I resigned. I didn't have a job to go to, but I was just exhausted. They recognised that perhaps I wasn't well, wasn't myself, and said, well, we will remove all your responsibilities. That will help. Then you can teach a full timetable and have a form group. That will help. But I said, well, no, I've worked hard for my leadership role. I don't feel that's the issue. I think it is, the form was the last straw. I enjoy my job. But I was given a week to think about it, told that they wouldn't advertise for another history teacher to replace me. 2 days later, I was invited back. Oh, we found a humanities teacher that might like the job. So if you still want to offer your resignation, we'll accept that. And I was exhausted and couldn't fight. So I handed in my resignation without a job to go to, and gave 5 months notice. That didn't go down well. That apparently wasn't really long enough, and kept going. So I didn't have any more time off sick. I had an extremely good sick record before and since. But, I was exhausted. I think just couldn't go on. So for me, the dictatorship style, it might have worked for the school. They got good just after I left. For me, it didn't work. I exited the teaching profession for the sake of my own well-being. Hadn't planned to leave. It was just a whirlwind thing. Part of me I still can't believe it happened. So after 15 years, I left teaching. I did get another job, but not in teaching before I left. So it made me question, is there ever a need for a dictatorship style? And I think not. I think great leaders do have a difficult job. They have to be held to account, hold others to account. But I think this could be done with compassion and care, and not, it doesn't seem to be soft, but not at the expense of staff. Or was it a dictatorship? Perhaps that was my perception. Was it just that staff didn't matter, that school was always coming first? But I'd have to question that. I'd have to challenge that. Did the school come first? The lead teacher of humanities that replaced me lasted less than 2 terms. So they had to advertise and appoint a new head teacher. So I'm not sure that a service was done to the students who had 3 teachers within a year. Would it not have been better perhaps to take care of the member of staff that they had that had been doing, if I'm blowing my own trumpet, a good job at that point? So 2 years on, I'm still making a difference to children's lives. I work for an education company, but behind the scenes, just like this, managing teachers remotely. It's a 9-to-5 job, and it's given me time to heal, to get myself really well. But it doesn't challenge me. It doesn't use my skill set. I'm underutilised and unfulfilled. So just begun coaching other teachers, and that's reminded me how much I miss school, how much I miss my teaching colleagues. And I'm not sure what's next. I felt at the time that I had failed when I left school, but I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to feel like a victim. Was I a bad teacher or leader? No, I was just unwell and exhausted. And I don't feel I'm done. I feel I have a lot more to offer the teaching profession. So I choose to challenge a system like this that allows good teachers to just leave. I see on Twitter this week already 2 NQTs saying that they're done after 2 terms. And something needs to be done, I think, to keep good teachers in the profession. So I look back on with pride on the 15 years. I think I made a difference to students and to some teachers too, I hope. I'm not sure what I'll do next. I'm not sure if school has a place for me, still being out for 2 years, but I do know I have much more to give. Thank you for listening.
That's fantastic, Leslie. Thank you so much. I think we're all in agreement here today as well that you have an awful lot left to give as well, and just really excited to hear more from you and to continue to see the support that you give to a whole range of different practitioners. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm now going to hand back to Kerry, who's going to continue to introduce our next speaker.
With permission, Kate. Yeah, with permission, Kate, I just want to also say, when you introduced Women Ed and our values and what we stand for, I think it's really important that we stand for protecting our teachers and protecting all women and our profession. We hear so much about how the profession is losing great, outstanding women, and Women Ed, as one of our campaigns, is to look after each other, and that is a form of our allyship. So thank you, Leslie, for coming out and speaking, because as I was looking around and seeing nodding heads, I saw and I heard people saying to you, yes, we need you in this, we need you in the profession. So thank you so much. The second person, really wonderful colleague and friend and ally that I am introducing today, her first time of speaking at a Women Ed event, Christina. I think Christina Aston and I met about 6 years ago, and she had a wonderful idea of a partnership between one of the most prestigious independent schools in the country and grammar schools and non-selective schools and independent schools and a university in East Kent. And she put this idea on the table and said, what do you think, Kerry? And that was the beginning of a fantastic relationship and friendship that I built with Christina. But Christina has been more than 10% braver and has now gone on to develop the next phase of her professional career and professional life, which I know is going to be just as impactful. And I'm so delighted that Christina is here to share and talk with us today. So over to you, Christina.
Well, thank you so much, Kerry. What a lovely introduction from one of my biggest allies, and listening what allyship is all about, that is exactly what you've been for me. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to share my screen now. I've got a few pictures to show you, and I'd like to talk about the STEM pipeline, because my background is as a physics teacher. And I've spent much of my career trying to stem this leaky STEM pipeline, sorry about the pun, and really what I'd like to do today is to talk about how school leaders, some of you may be school leaders yourselves, can help to fix the pipeline for science, technology, engineering and maths, because I'm sure you're all aware we simply don't have enough women taking part. So, well, I mean, let's start with my story. I failed. Basically, I failed. I was a head of physics in the school that Kerry mentioned, a large co-ed independent school, and in the early 2000s, I was unable to get a higher proportion of girls taking A-level physics. It stuck around about 20%. And it, you know, it didn't help that some of the unhelpful things that parents say to you at parents' meetings. I was the first female physics teacher in that school. And, you know, I had colleagues, I had my predecessor in my department. It was, you know, that was quite challenging. And I could have probably done with a few more allies back at that time. Now, I wasn't alone, at least I know that now. And the percentage of girls taking physics A-level has really not changed in about 30 years. You can see physics at the bottom, rumbling along there, stubbornly staying at about between 20 and 25%. It's a bit better in girls only schools, I have to say. And this isn't just a problem for girls in STEM. I mean, look at this graph. The boys are in green here. You'll see that there's just as much of a problem, as I'm sure you're all aware, with boys taking languages as there is with girls taking STEM subjects. So what is this problem all about? Well, let's have a look at the societal stereotypes that we're up against. If you Google scientist, you may get a collection of images like this. Science is seen as difficult, it's seen as nerdy, it's seen as the preserve of mostly white, middle-class, middle-aged men wearing white lab coats standing in a laboratory. And of course, science isn't like that anymore. It really, really isn't. And jobs in science don't necessarily come with the label scientist. You can imagine how off-putting this image is to girls who are reaching adolescence, where their self-image is really, really important to them. And this is just terribly off-putting. So, I mean, a lot of people have talked about whether these differences between girls and boys are genuine natural differences or whether they are societal stereotypes. And I won't go into the nature-nurture debate now, but whichever it is, schools have a real battle to try and reverse those stereotypes, not just working with their students, but also with their colleagues and with their parents too. And so I'll talk in a little moment about what I think school leaders can do about this. Why is this a problem if girls don't want to become scientists? What's the issue? Well, maybe they're choosing against becoming scientists for the wrong reasons, and we've got to choose to challenge those reasons. We need more scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians to combat the problems that face our planet at the moment, climate emergencies, pandemics, and so on. And, you know, actually, maybe girls would have happy, fulfilled careers in science. And if they're being put off for the wrong reasons, that's got to be something that we have to challenge. Now, the good news is that there are actually some new solutions that have recently become apparent. There's been some fantastic research done by lots of organisations, and many of you will be familiar with the work of WISE, Women in Science and Engineering. This little slide here shows the results from the Aspires project from a few years ago, which really illustrates that kids think that science is brilliant, but they don't want to be scientists. And two things came out of the Aspires project that I think are brilliant. One is the idea of science capital and trying to engage parents to help their children to engage with science as a cultural part of their growing up. And I think engaging with parents is really, really key for school leaders. And the second thing is that this idea of people like me. Too long, we've described what it is to be a scientist as a set of nouns or a set of verbs. And now, if we describe what it is like to be a scientist, we're using adjectives. And this has actually had quite a transformational effect on recruiting girls. One of the spin-offs from this has been the My Skills, My Life project. Now, if you haven't had a go at this, there's the link at the bottom there. Have a go. It's a little quiz that you can try, and it'll tell you what kind of personality you have and what sort of careers might be appropriate for you. You'll notice that you can see, maybe if you can read those pink boxes, that it doesn't say anything about science or STEM, and in fact that's the great thing about it. It's sort of STEM by stealth, really. If you're interested, my 3 attributes came out as I'm an influencer, a campaigner, and a communicator. Well, I guess that's why I'm here today. So that's a fantastic project, and I'm actually delivering some workshops on that in this coming week, because it's also British Science Week. And in answer to Flick's question earlier, I'm always delighted to come and address students, girls or boys, both teachers, school leaders, about this important area of life. The Institute of Physics, my mothership, if you like, has done a lot of myth busting, brilliant work, not just on physics, but on whole school gender balance and equality projects. And really the sort of final part of my story is that I'm happy to say that after 4 years as head of physics in that school, I went on to become head of science and then some other things. I managed to get the numbers from doing A-level physics from 25 up to the 70s. Now, the percentage of girls remained stubbornly low at about 20–25%, but at least the number of girls taking A-level physics improved. And it did take me to be a little bit more than 10% braver, especially being that first and only woman in the department to start with. But I had a lot of support eventually from colleagues and from school leaders. We improved the curriculum, we raised results, we improved the environment, the physical environment for the girls to come into, to make it more welcoming. And by the end of my tenure, 4 out of the 7 physics teachers were women. So I'm quite proud of that. So how can school leaders help this? Well, I've got 3 messages, 3 calls to action for any of you out there who are school leaders or in a position to have some influence over this. The first is good quality teaching. Of course, this benefits all students, but it does particularly benefit the girls because the girls need to feel confident in their teacher. The boys are a little bit more gung-ho when they make their A-level choices. It's actually more important that we have good quality teachers than we have female teachers. And as you'll all be aware, there's a real shortage of science teachers, particularly physics specialists in this country. The average time that a science teacher spends in the profession is 5 years, the average time. Now, I think that's shocking. So we've got to do something about this, ladies. We've got to recruit smarter, recruiting just in case, rather than recruiting when there's a need, at pay, looking creatively at things like recruiting teaching couples or helping with relocation, where we have the ability to do that. And CPD for retention is absolutely key, and being flexible enough to allow science departments to have subject-specific CPD, rather than sitting through, as Leslie described, some fairly dire sort of dictatorial whole school CPD. Secondly, whole school gender policy. I'm sure that all of us here are here because we've thought about these things, and maybe we make diversity very visible in our schools. But it's really important to lead from the top, to pop into science lessons, to have on diversity on the agenda for every department and every meeting that happens in schools, and perhaps to have a gender champion. I think it's really important to tackle unconscious bias, which can be really prevalent in science through the curriculum, through the contexts that we use in our teaching. Perhaps consider having single-sex clubs. It can be very intimidating to be the only girl turning up to the Year 8 robotics club. And also thinking about careers, which I'll mention in my final one, which is role models. We can't be what we can't see. So thinking about getting speakers, fantastic female role model speakers into your school to talk about careers, to talk about their work, to talk about the exciting developments in science, whether they come from the world of work or your parents, alumni, universities, STEM ambassadors and so on. We know that choosing A-levels is the first and biggest leak in the pipeline. So if we can spend more than just, one evening on the A-level information and really embed it in everything we do in Key Stage 4 and maybe 3 as well. Getting parents on board is absolutely key. They need information too. We need to challenge their stereotypes. As well as the quote I mentioned earlier, I've had parents sit across me at parents' meetings and say, loudly in front of their daughters, oh, well, I was never any good at physics. It's not helpful. And perhaps we can use our older female students, our sixth form girls, as role models to help with younger students, whether it's teaching, helping in the science club and so on. So what I do now is I'm the science advisor for Kent. I do a lot of work with schools on science, but also middle leadership and, as I mentioned, partnerships. If I can help to influence this in any way, I always try to. If you are a school leader or you've got science department, or if you're a science teacher yourself, you do look like a physics teacher. You don't have to be a sort of Albert Einstein lookalike with leather patches on the elbows of your tweed jacket. Choose to challenge these stereotypes, choose to mend the leaky pipeline, and thank you very much. Do get in touch if I can help you in your school.
That was
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you so, so much, Christina. It's really, really empowering to hear the work that you're undertaking to challenge those stereotypes. Working in an all-girls school myself, it's a sort of a really integral part of our vision and values is to get them to recognise that breadth of opportunity that's open to them in the future, and that any role, whether an existing one or a career that hasn't even been created yet, is open to them. And it's just fabulous to hear the work that you're doing to help support girls such as that in their journeys. Wonderful. I'm now going to hand over to Sue, who's going to give us some insight into the work that she undertakes in her role as an SBO. So Sue, over to you.
Morning, everybody. I'm sorry that you're not listening to Jo this morning, and we do send her our love and hope she's feeling better soon. So school business leaders are one of the slightly underrepresented roles sometimes within a school. If you have a look at your school staffing headcount, you'll probably realise that teachers are quite often the minority out of the members of staff within schools. Particularly if you're looking at primary schools, you're more likely to have slightly more support staff in terms of teaching and in terms of your office and admin support staff than you do teachers. So one of the things that SBL Connect, which is a fantastic grassroots organisation, is trying to promote is the fact that it's not just teachers who work in school. We love teachers. Teachers are amazing. We're absolutely behind teachers, but we're just saying that we're here as well. We'd like to change the vocab that is being used around the school staff who work in school. We'd like to try and encourage the Department of Education to remember that it's not just teachers who work in school. So you might wonder what a school business leader does. School business leaders within schools do slightly different roles depending on how many people you've got in your school, how many students, how many staff. They are a really good term for them is the Google of your school. If you don't know how something works or a process, your school business leader does, your office manager, your finance manager, they'll show you how to do it, they'll tell you the answer. We are looking after the HR, the IT, the finance, premises, your catering, your admissions. We're dealing with your families. We're supporting your staff as well. So many of us do all of those roles just as one person. If you're working in a slightly bigger secondary school, or if you're working as part of a multi-academy trust, you might be lucky to have a team to work with together as well to be able to promote those roles and to encourage the aspirations within those roles as well. One of the things that I'm really passionate about as a school business leader is to make sure that we have CPD budget available for things outside of statutory CPD for our support staff. So we're not just looking at safeguarding, but we're actually looking at encouraging careers that we're starting right at the beginning, and we're looking for ways of developing the skills that we have from our young students and graduates joining our teams, and also for the existing members of staff to make sure that they have got the newer practices, that they've got the skills to do remote working, that they've got the skills to use Excel spreadsheets, to use Word documents, to make sure that we have that cohesive, joined up thinking that's keeping our schools safe, operational, open. We've managed all of this over the years quite quietly. There's a really good article that Hilary Goldsmith read, and I'm going to throw that into the group chat at some point just after this presentation, talking about the way that the teams are divided within a school, and that if you don't have a seat at the leadership table and you are a school business manager, take your own, get in there, ask to be part of a meeting because you'd like to be an observer. If somebody says, oh no, you can't possibly make a contribution to this meeting, just go along for the experience, you know, really put your hand up and offer to make that difference as part of your school. If you're a teacher or you're an NQT, find out what your support staff do. Find out not just the ones who are your classroom assistants, but the person sitting in the office. What is it that their roles do? Maybe do a bit of a day of shadowing, even a couple of hours of shadowing. Quite often when you have a teacher answering the phones in a school, they say, oh, how have you done all of this, and do your day job as well. And then on top of this, during the pandemic, we've managed to show great resilience, and you'll find a lot of the school business leaders have worked tirelessly throughout this pandemic to do all of the extra reporting, to organise all of the testing, to make sure that your children are looked after remotely and be in touch, and the safeguarding that's been going on there. There's all sorts of diverse roles within the business leader community and within your support staff as well. So please keep an eye on them as your head teachers and your assistant head teachers as well. Look after their well-being as well as your teaching staff's well-being, and just put your head in, drop a biscuit and a cup of tea in, and just make sure that they're feeling valued too. So that's us flying the flag for school business leaders. There's a fantastic Twitter community. If you just put in a hashtag SBL or SBM, you'll find lots of us. And we're such a supportive, fun community out there. So be in touch. And yes, I'll happily do a school presentation.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sue. Sue's, for everyone's information, such an integral part of our Women Ed community. And I love the role that she plays in reminding us, and we do need reminding at times, that the school community is much more than just its teachers and its students. And actually what enables a school to live and to run and to function is all of the other roles and the capacities that people have. And I think you play a really important part of just reminding us about all of those roles, Sue. So just thank you for the role that you play.
Thank you, Kate.
It gives me even more pleasure to be able to continue with our speakers today. And in a moment, I'm going to play you a recording by one of our contributors today, Victoria, who is here and can give us a wave. So Victoria was an individual who comes once again to the profession with a wealth of experience, and I'm hoping that I can play her recording so you can hear her messages live and so you can sort of better understand the experiences that she has, but also the incredibly exciting project that she's been working on and the work behind the scenes that she's doing to empower teachers, but even more importantly to empower the young people that we work with to become these future leaders and to be able to shape their own destinies. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully play the recording. If those panelists on screen can just kindly let me know that when I start playing, I will pause just to make sure that the sound is coming through, and fingers crossed the tech will all work. Thank you, everyone. Perfect. Can you kindly give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can see that? Fabulous. Okay, and hopefully the sound will play.
Huge thanks to Women Ed South East and East of England for organising today's International Women's Day celebration. It's such a pleasure to be involved. My name is Victoria Rad and I'm the founder of Student Futures. And today I'd like to talk to you about closing young people's aspiration gap. So I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about my background and how I came into education, why I created Student Futures, the career and life coaching programme for young people, and what Student Futures can bring to secondary schools today. So I've always been passionate about gender equality, and when I graduated, I was fortunate enough to be able to work in the women's equality sector, which I loved. I was working in communications and events, and it was during these few years that I really realised just how prevalent the confidence gap is for women. And during this time, I was also able to undertake 6 months career coaching through a women's networking event. And it was a transformative experience for me because I was able to recognise my own passion for tackling the confidence gap before it took root by working with teenage girls. And also that I wanted to work directly with young people to share the power of education. Now, I'd never considered teaching as a career before, but by moving away from thinking about job titles and instead focusing on aspects of work and my own strengths and passions, I was able to see that teaching English in an all-girls state school would enable me to combine my love of gender equality with my love of literature. So 3 years after my PGCE, I had my first baby, and I was feeling really mindful about leaving my teaching job and my deputy head of year role. But actually, on returning to work a year later, part-time, I gave me a brand new flexibility and perspective. And it was during this time that I returned 2 days a week as an English teacher and sixth form tutor. that I recognised that young girls and teenagers weren't only tackling the beginnings of the confidence gap, they were also grappling with an aspiration gap in terms of their future plans. I found that many students were ruling themselves out of potential career pathways before they had even researched them. The education system rightly encourages young people to constantly focus on their areas for development in order to help them make the greatest academic progress and achieve the best grades that they can. But, as I'm sure lots of us are familiar with, young people can often apply a fixed mindset that prohibits them from taking a journey of development because their fear of failure prohibits them from even trying. What I realised was that the majority of young people were applying this fixed mindset to their post-school choices, ruling out options before they'd even had a chance to learn more about them, because the fear of the unknown and their lack of self-confidence was so great. But perhaps it's not surprising. They were applying this academic mindset of focusing on their even better ifs to their personality and their interests, and were therefore inadvertently undermining their own confidence and options. But building a fulfilling career is about the opposite, as I learned myself from career coaching. It's about identifying one's strengths and building on these to create a career out of them. It also requires the confidence, as Charles Sandberg says, to forget the career ladder and try the jungle gym. Because the world we live in today offers vast career potential and flexibility. As the Financial Times says, many of us will have up to as many as 5 careers in our lifetime. But students need support and scaffolding to realise and embrace this. So halfway through my first year returning part-time from maternity leave, I started gathering ideas and booked a meeting with my head teacher and presented a proposal of a series of talks with inspiring women from different career backgrounds to present role models and career pathways to young people. She is a fantastic leader, and she encouraged me to go away and develop my ideas further to see if I could push myself to come up with something beyond this. And that's when I collated all of my different ideas and workshop concepts and created a program called Student Futures that's focused on empowering young people to make informed choices about their future and to facilitate them seeing school as a springboard, not just something to get through, so that they can make the most of the supportive and nurturing environment that they're in to try new things. My initial proposal, when I met with her the next time, was to create these events during tutor times and lunch times. But again, I'm really fortunate that my leadership team encouraged me to think broadly, and they gave me the opportunity to instead create an immersive experience by running these events as a 4-day festival for 120 Year 12 students. So in 2018, I conceptualised over 30 different workshops and organised a range of staff and external speakers to deliver them, and designed the programme across 3 different pillars. The personal, so students could learn more about themselves and their passions. Professional, so that they could explore different career pathways, networking, application, CV writing. And practical, to develop their knowledge and strategies for self-reflection, goal mapping and financial independence. The 4-day festival was a real success, and the feedback from students, staff and external speakers was fantastic. Students described how it gave them the confidence, inspiration and excitement for their future. Staff loved having the opportunity to engage with students outside of their subject specialism, running workshops as varied as imposter syndrome to creating a healthy relationship with social media. And the external speakers, who were experts in fields such as public speaking, resilience and self-care, really enjoyed having the opportunity to work with a younger demographic and learn from them. Following the success of the first festival, I've developed the programme further and created a Year 10 festival, expanded the workshop offerings for Year 12 and built consolidation activities for Year 11 so they can continue their journey of student futures throughout Key Stage 4 and 5. I've also created a range of activities to help support Year 8 with their options process. All of these activities and workshops have the objective of helping young people shift their mindset So they don't have the pressure of leaving school with a specific career path or job title in mind, but instead have the knowledge and the toolkit to empower themselves to have a growth mindset that gives them the confidence, resilience, and courage to learn more about themselves and their future aspirations. All with the goal to give them the knowledge to seek a fulfilling career and create their own unique definition of success. In the current climate of unprecedented uncertainty and anxiety due to the pandemic, it's more important than ever for young people to build on and draw on their inner confidence and belief system. I recently relocated from London to Norwich, and whilst I'm currently on maternity leave, I'm seeking to work with schools from September when the new academic year is settled and we've all adapted to working with the new normal, to help young people build their confidence and feel excited so they can thrive and feel full of hope for their future prospects. If you'd like to learn more about Student Futures, I would love to hear from you, so please do get in touch by email. And to finish off, I'd like to welcome the opportunity for all of us this International Women's Day to choose to challenge two things. One, to challenge young people so that they close their aspiration gap for their future. And two, to challenge ourselves as educators to move away from asking young people what they'd like to do when they grow up, and instead to ask them what their passions are, what drives them, what their goals are for their future, so that we can help them build on these. Thank you all so much for the opportunity for being a part of today. Wishing you all a very happy International Women's Day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Victoria. I'm going to just leave that slide up just for a moment. So those of you that are attending today, if you'd like to get in touch with Victoria Rad for any more information about Student Futures, that you're more than welcome to do so. It's quite easy to understand, Victoria, how your students are so enthused by the work that you have undertaken based on the passion that you share for this. And it has huge value in getting young people to see education, not, as you said, as something that just needs to be completed, but as an opportunity, a door, a platform for opening their eyes to all sorts of other experiences in the futures and really helping them to become successful and responsible citizens in the wider world and to see learning as a journey throughout life. So really, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm now going to hand over to Sian, who is going to introduce our next speaker, Craig. So Sian, over to you.
Good morning. What a fantastic morning we've had already. I feel quite overwhelmed by the speakers. It's totally inspiring, really, really amazing. I've written so many notes of so many things that I've got to do when I go back to school, and I'm going to be busy for a year. Anyway, this is my second conference, and I'm delighted to see so many people here, and I'm really proud and pleased to be able to introduce Craig to you, who is new to my senior leadership team. When I asked Craig if he would speak today, he was very pleased to do so, and we talked about what he would speak about, and I asked him if he would be speaking about what it's like to be led by a female principal, i.e. me. And I was so interested in his response. He said to me, well, I don't think of you as a female principal. I just think of you as my leader. And it made me think for a moment of all the decades of work that I'd done to build my self-confidence, that if only I'd applied that to myself, that I'm not thought of as a woman leader, but thought of as just a leader. And so I'm really, really delighted that today, when Craig speaks, I know that he will be thinking of us all as just leaders who are able to stand up alongside our male counterparts and be counted and acknowledged for the fabulous leaders we are. I'm very proud to hand over to Craig. He's been a fabulous addition to my senior leadership team, and having seen what he's going to talk about, I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Sian, for that introduction, and thank you to everyone so far this morning. I'm really enjoying it. There's been some really powerful words and messages, and I'm really humbled, actually. It's quite difficult to follow you guys, so I am feeling a bit overwhelmed as well by what I've heard so far. I'm learning a lot, so thank you very much. I hope that you enjoy some of the messages that I'm going to put across, and hopefully everyone can take something away that will be useful. I think with the topic of challenge and relationships and the balance between the two, for me it's a constant battle, a constant consideration to keep those two things in balance. And it's really interesting to hear things from Janine talking about allies, and listening to Leslie about relationships. And I hope that this relates to those two as well. I don't know if I've got control of these slides or whether, no. Can I have the next slide, please?
I think you're going to have to do your best Chris Whitty impression, Craig, and we can
just Thank you. So obviously level of challenge and great relationships should both be valued, and I see the challenge and challenging effectively is essential for a school to move forward, and for an improving school and for schools to keep their standards high for the students is really, really important. But on the other side, the effective relationships, having staff that are happy to work hard and happy to go above and beyond and are not resentful for doing that, and essentially will stay. So that constant balance, and I see this balance as being as constant and ever-changing. It doesn't really tend just to stay as it is. I think you've got to work really hard to keep it in balance. So I'm going to just talk about some extremes of imbalance. So could I have the next slide, please? So first one, and I think, I've definitely been guilty of this, of really valuing the level of challenge. Maybe there's something that the school needs to improve, and being quite headstrong with thinking, well, that needs to be improved, so let's really go for it. And then just not valuing the relationship enough, maybe going into it and just being too focused on that improvement. So inevitably leading to people feeling undervalued, stressed. Probably teachers will always work hard, won't they, in my experience, but maybe they'll feel resentful for doing so, and maybe they won't go above and beyond like they could do with better support. Can I have the next slide, please? And the other way, if as a leader you're valuing those great relationships, we all do, we've all got to, but at the expense of challenge. So maybe saying, well, we need great relationships, so I'm just going to ease off, I'm not going to challenge. I think that can be just as bad. People need challenge, in my experience. We don't want standards to fall. We want the school to have a culture where people are happy to go above and beyond, and so challenge needs to be considered, not just pushing a high level of challenge all the time, but having an appropriate level of challenge. And so when I say value, I mean value the appropriate level of challenge. I think for me, it's just about knowing people, isn't it? About knowing the having good relationships with people, making sure that there is that balance, so we don't get those extremes. Can I have the next slide, please? And then this quote from Stephen Covey of "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." And I think it's interesting that this message has been coming across, I think, so far this morning, of perhaps people not being understood, and a consideration of people's situations. And so I feel as a leader, it's a responsibility to really understand. And I'm not going to get any of my points across unless I understand somebody's situation. So it's really quite difficult to hear Leslie's experience, because clearly there wasn't a level of understanding there. And then I just wanted to share some of my personal experience of understanding. So I've just made understanding bold there and in red, just to emphasize it. And we're just going to talk about a beach ball, sort of thinking of understanding where it's very easy just to see one side of the beach ball and just to see maybe one or two colours of the beach ball and not to see the whole beach ball. And just thinking about, well, to understand a situation is like seeing the whole of the beach ball, and you have to see it from different angles. And that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of effort to come at different situations and different people's viewpoints and have a whole understanding. So when I talk about understanding the beach ball, hopefully you can picture the beach ball as seeing all of those, in this case, 6 different colours of the beach ball. And in my experience, coming from a middle leader, I was a head of department before stepping into being an assistant principal. And I felt that I'd spent several years as a teacher where I was getting a good understanding, where I was seeing lots of different colours of the beach ball, and I was gaining a good understanding. So when I stepped into a leadership role there, I felt like I had a good understanding. I could see quite a lot of the beach ball over time. And when I stepped into my head of department role, I could see quite a bit of it. And then personally for me, when I stepped into the senior leadership role, the thing I noticed is for a lot of the roles and responsibilities I had, I couldn't see much of the beach ball. I could maybe only see 1 panel or 2 panels. So I had to go and really, really understand and see all those different colours of the beach ball, and ask myself lots of questions of, well, can I challenge if I don't understand? And I didn't feel comfortable to challenge if I didn't understand. Could I have the next slide, please? So I just felt when I stepped into senior leadership, which wasn't very long ago, only this year, as I say, uncomfortable to challenge if I didn't have that level of understanding. And I felt that I couldn't build a good relationship unless I could see most of that beach ball, and I'd looked at it from the other person's viewpoint and seen the pressures that they were under from lots of different angles. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is kind of, I've called this the challenge sandwich, because we know that challenge is important because it drives schools forward. And there are things that schools need to do to improve, and we do need to keep standards high so that we add value to students. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that, but it's just the appropriate way to do it. And for me, I feel like building the relationship before and building the relationship after is probably going to give us this balance between the two. So first of all, understanding and trying to see the beach ball before going into a level of challenge, so that there's a really high level of understanding. And then afterwards with support, and making sure that it doesn't just end with the challenge, it continues, and it builds relationships. Next slide, please. So with the understanding, again, we're trying to see all 6 colours of the beach ball. And for me personally, I've had to, as I say, really work on this. Listening with the intent to understand being first. I don't think you're going to see any sides of the beach ball unless you listen. But I've had to work on listening without having my own agenda, really trying to see things from other people's point of view, and considering that and being present in those conversations with the intent just to understand the situation. It's another person's viewpoint which can only be improved if the leader understands it wholly. Then about the questions and preparing, and I try to prepare open-ended questions to get the understanding, because sometimes people may not want to share for whatever reason. And so it does lead to trust. And so respect is really important in the listening and encouraging people to talk about issues, but not judging at all at this stage, because the beach ball's there. And if we try to mask anything, then we're not going to move forwards. So it's that not judging and respecting, and then really helping the person that we're leading to feel important and feel valued before moving into any sort of aspect of challenge. Have the next slide, please. And then the challenge is there, and it's appropriate challenge. The challenge is set for the individual or for the team, so that it's appropriate for them to improve. And that's going to be different for every single person. A one size fits all is not going to work with challenge. So high levels of challenge, yes, important, but high for the individual, based on their situation, based on the other pressures that they're under, and just a real consideration of all sides of that beach ball. And then the challenge, hopefully through questioning, so trying not to give direct orders, and coaching. So I know there's been a lot said about coaching. I'm certainly not an expert in coaching, but the more we can give somebody ownership over their own goals and actions, the better. And then in line with the school improvement plan, which I'll just talk about in just a second. Could I have the next slide, please? And then this bottom half here, so we don't just have challenge stop, we have challenge support. And I think with that honest, sincere appreciation, for me there's two aspects to that. The first one is the honest one, and not just appreciating and flattering. For it needs to be really honest, otherwise it will come across as fake, and that's, in my experience, that's not going to work. But the actively seeking things. So I think as a leader, going out of your way to find somebody that you're leading and find them doing the good things, to empower them to keep on doing those good things, can be really, really effective. But then also that empowering of support, but not micromanaging, letting somebody have that power, and that comes back to developing staff, and so giving them the power to move through, because it's their thing. As a leader, we can support, but essentially we're leading people to lead themselves. But keeping the challenge high and supporting to keep the challenge high. And again, that's for the school, that's for the students. Could I have the next slide, please? And then I'd just like to link the challenge aspect with Jim Collins' model of leadership. Jim Collins has a hierarchy of leadership, with level 4 being an effective leader, but then the level 5, and what distinguishes the level 5 being that the ambition and focus of the school is first and foremost for the school and not for themselves. And this has really helped me personally to depersonalize challenge. So when it comes to being braver, with a focus on the school and what is right for the school, instead of thinking about being a leader and you have to challenge somebody. So if you've got understanding, but you still know that you're going to need to challenge somebody about something, having the focus on the school. It's not about the leader, it's about the school. And just having that real determination, first and foremost, for the school to succeed should help with the bravery to challenge, as long as you can see the whole beach ball. And the next slide, please. And then just to summarize, really, I know that the strap line of 10% braver, I love that. And I'm trying to live by that as well as a new leader, of trying to be brave, my own aspects. So these 4 aspects, I think, do all take bravery, and it sort of benefits the school holistically. So as a leader, asking key questions to understand, so seeing the whole beach ball, being a level 5 leader and having high levels of challenge for the school, actively seeking good things happening to support members of staff, to empower them, and then just putting the school first and being that level 5 leader. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I would welcome you to challenge me as long as you support me.
That was brilliant, Craig. Thank you so much. What an amazing analogy. I've never thought of the idea of a beach ball and the multifaceted way in which it represents all the different areas in a school. And I think it's such an important message you've shared about taking that step back particularly as school leaders, when we're thinking strategically and making sure that we have that understanding of the broader range of issues before acting, maybe only focusing on one element. So I'm going to steal that, to be honest. That's a great analogy. So thank you for sharing.
Hey, I'm taking no credit for that. That was Sian's. When I went through to Sian, thank you, Sian. I can't steal that for myself.
No, I was going to let you have that one.
No, it's yours.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Really, really important messages there. I'm now going to hand over to Cheryl, who's going to introduce our final speaker for today, Toria. Thank you, Cheryl.
Hello, everybody. Yep, as Kate said, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Toria Bono. Toria and I first met through her Twitter platform, Tiny Voice Talks, which is a really supportive platform, and teachers can support each other, but they can also collaborate on projects together. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Toria, who's going to speak about empowering others.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I've got my mug with me today, which says she believed she could, so she did, because this will give me the confidence. I want to say thank you to everyone who's organised this and to the speakers. You have utterly inspired me today. I'm sitting up a little taller because of all of you, and you've given me the courage to be 10% braver. In truth, I'm absolutely terrified, and I've never spoken without PowerPoint or without crutches, but I'm going to take myself back to being that sort of teenager in my bedroom holding a hairbrush and singing into it, just pretending that none of you are there and I'm just going to talk. So remember who you represent and come first in something. These were the words my father said every day as I left for school. Remember who you represent meant don't say anything out of turn, make sure you look well turned out, and don't let me down. Come first in something was his way of reminding me that this was something that I should always aspire to. Now, I want to clarify a couple of things at this point. I loved my dad very much, and he thought he was always saying and doing the right things. When I was 14, I was allowed to finally wear makeup, but not before I'd had a makeup lesson, as he wanted me to apply it properly. Experimenting with vivid colours, even though it was the 1980s, was not allowed. It was completely out of the question because he wanted me to look subtle and demure. I look back now and I realise that in me, my dad had his very own Eliza Doolittle, and he had great plans for me. He wanted me to go to Somerville College, Oxford, because that's where Margaret Thatcher had gone, and he wanted me to study law and Russian. He wanted me to change the world. And yes, he wanted me to come first in something. I was always in the A stream in school, but I was never at the top of the A stream. So whenever we had tests or got results back, my dad would always ask how those that he knew were sitting at the top had done. You know, oh, how did Shona do? How did Alison do? What about Noelle? He was interested in those that were ahead of me, cleverer than me. Perhaps that he wanted me to, well, I know he wanted me to aspire to be at the dizzy heights that they were all sitting at. Now, let me clarify again. I loved my dad very much, and he really did think he was saying and doing the right things to push me in the right direction. The difficulty for me is that those messages became ingrained. Girls and women had to look a certain way. They had to speak a certain way, and they had to compete with each other. There wasn't enough room for all women to do well. The places were finite. And if I was worth anything, then I had to have one of those places. I didn't go to Somerville College. I didn't study law and Russian. I went to Queen's University and I studied politics. I did do Russian. And then I became a teacher. Now, Dad, he was disgusted. He used to say, those that can't do, teach. And I was told that again and again and again. Now, I love teaching. It is, without doubt, my greatest passion. But I felt that I had to climb the ladder of leadership to placate him and show him that I was a success. Being a teacher wasn't enough. Looking back now, I realise how much I competed with the other women and struggled when they were promoted. Probably because it meant that I hadn't come first in something. When I look back on it, I didn't struggle with men succeeding. as much. In fact, I didn't struggle with men succeeding at all because it was just the norm. It was just what I expected. Might sound bizarre, I wasn't in competition with men because they were always going to succeed. I never questioned men getting positions over women, but I always felt less than when a woman got a position over me. I climbed the career ladder slowly, sadly too slowly for my dad to know about it, as he passed away 14 years ago. As I climbed higher, a strange thing happened. I was beset with imposter syndrome, and no matter what I achieved, I was always in second place to someone. I was never content, and the higher I got, the more alone I felt. This next bit's going to sound utterly bizarre, possibly awful, I don't know, but I was grateful when I was diagnosed with a rare disease in 2018. I re-evaluated my life, and in May 2019, I returned to the classroom full time. Now, this is when I entered the world of Twitter. I decided as a class teacher that I wanted to extend my network and I dabbled in Twitter. In February 2020, Tiny Voice Talks was born. I created Tiny Voice Talks as a way for the quieter educator to get their voice heard. I think this is because I always got scared of sharing my opinions professionally in case I got shouted down. And anyway, girls, women have to speak a certain way and they have to know their place. In spring 2020, I attended an I Am Remarkable workshop and realised that I wasn't alone in my feelings. Other women felt exactly the same. It was at this workshop a penny dropped for me. I realised that I'd always been in competition with every other woman and that each time they succeeded, it shone a light on my lack of success. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the mother in me rearing up and not wanting my daughter to grow up with the same pressures and feeling of inadequacy. But I set out to actively grow Tiny Voice Talks and give the quieter educators even more opportunities to be heard. I ran blogging webinars, hosted educational events, and started a podcast. I especially wanted to start raising the voices of women. I wanted to pass the mic to them, and I really wanted to hear them. I hadn't realised that I was empowering others until someone pointed it out. And you know what? It felt amazing. I felt amazing because I was helping others to find their voice and use it for good. I also didn't feel inadequate or like I was in competition anymore. Now, during this time, people began to call me a leader. And I'll be honest, I felt incredibly uncomfortable about this. How could I be a leader when I didn't have a title or any form of status? And then I came across this quote by Lisa Haysher. Great leaders don't set out to be leaders. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, always about the goal. Now, this quote changed my mindset. And alongside the confidence that I gained from empowering others, it enabled me to step back into leadership, but leadership that I wanted. I'm now an evidence lead educator for a local research school and the equity and diversity lead in my school. I'm getting my voice heard. I am making a difference. I am challenging, and I'm leading in a way that I want, which is in a way that affects change and empowers others. And do you know what? The ladder is nowhere to be seen. Great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. Do you know what this means? It means that every single one of you here are leaders, because whether you're speaking or you're attending, you're here because you want to make a difference. International Women's Day, that's my t-shirt, is about choosing to challenge. And if we do that, we will make a difference. If we stand shoulder to shoulder and celebrate the success of each other, we are making a difference and we are challenging the existing system. Now, I want you to do something that may appear bizarre. I want you to hold out your arms and I want you to open your hands. Now close your eyes. I want you to imagine that we are virtually standing in a circle. each of us holding another's hand. I want you to squeeze your right hand, and I want you to feel the squeeze of someone on your left hand. I want you to squeeze your left hand, and I want you to feel the squeeze of someone on your right hand. I want you to feel the power and strength of this circle, knowing that you aren't alone. Through connecting and collaborating with one another, we can build our confidence. We can support each other to have clarity, and we can learn to challenge confidently and enact change. Communicating with other women in this community will give us, no, it does give us strength. You're not alone. We are not in competition. We are all here together making a difference, and we can break down the barriers to women leading in education if we work together. There's enough space on the podium for every single one of us. So what can you do today to empower another woman and help her to recognize the light that shines within her? What can you do to champion, advocate, and protect, as we've heard today again and again? What can you do to challenge existing beliefs and systems? I want to challenge. Do you? If you do, raise your hand with me and say, I choose to challenge. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Thank you so, so much, Toria. I mean, I like to think that part of the reason that I'm here today is because of the platform, the voice, the strength, the confidence that you gave in allowing me to find my voice. And it was a journey, and thank you, you know, and you've done so much to help empower others and to give them that platform. So just keep being you, keep doing what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Right. Well, we are at the end of all of our speeches today. I don't really want it to end. I don't know about you all. I could spend the day just listening to all your wonderful messages. Before we finish, I want to make sure that any questions that you might want to ask of any of our panelists are answered. So I'm going to hand over to Leanne, who I know has been monitoring the chat and will be able to share anything that people have.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions come through. So one from Moira to Janine, and she says, as a woman, men jump in to speak for her in the name of allyship. And what suggestions do you have for coping with this?
That's a tough one. I'm only just getting to a place where I feel comfortable doing what I'm about to suggest. So let them speak. And then when they're finished, you say, thank you so much. What I wanted to say, what I am going to say is, and then you explain your message. Some will continue to be obtuse and keep talking over us. That happens often, but others will get the message. So good luck with that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Janine. And we have got another one, and it's for you again. And this one was from Lindway, and she says, how do you respond to implicit biases in the spirit of allyship? And I suppose that's a link to that, our first question, but yeah, what would you think of that one?
Again, shame's a difficult word, but I'm going to use it. I am ashamed I feel some shame about having to admit that I am only just coming into a place personally and professionally where I'm happy to confront these issues. So implicit bias, we see it all the time, but I have in recent months been in a position where I have had to say thank you so much, but here is my perception of what you're saying. Other people might perceive what you're saying as, have you thought about, I mean, I don't know if any of this is making any sense, but this is how I've had to go about starting these conversations, right? Are you aware that in coming to me about how to deal with a young Black man who has trashed a classroom at school, there is a perception that you're coming to me because I am also Black? And then you wait. So that's, I don't think there's any advice there, but that's.
Thank you, Gina. I'm sure that's really helpful. And thank you to Linda, Moira, and also to Flick earlier on for your questions. I have been scrolling through the chat, furiously trying to find some more, but I'm not sure there are any. So I'm sure that you have all been so thorough and so inspiring and powerful in your talks that you've not left any room for people to think of questions. So thank you very much to everyone. So I'll pass back to Kate now for the closing speak.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm actually going to hand over to Bianca, who's going to say a final few words just before we finish today and allow you to go away and to reflect and to take on board all of the information that's been shared. Bianca.
Thank you to all of our panelists and all of our attendees to today's event. There are so many messages, I think, coming through all of our speakers today, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming stepping away from these sessions because we have a lot to think about and to reflect on a personal and a professional level. And I think, you know, like a lot of our speakers today, I think that 10% bravery is actually not being afraid that what you have to say is something that other people might not agree with or might not like to hear. And you know what, at the risk of getting it wrong, I think we've just got to continue being disruptors. You know, we've got to continue speaking out and sharing and not be afraid to share thought and process and journey, because it's ever changing. And, you know, new information comes to light and new research comes to light and it gets us thinking differently. And I think if we just keep talking about it and we don't stay silent about our position and where we position ourselves, then we keep the dialogue going and then we affect that change. So thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Obviously the video is going to be available. I am going to hand back to Kate because she is always super organised, proactive, positive, and embraces everybody around her. And I think really the final word should go to her.
Thank you, Bianca. Well, certainly I would like to just say that what I mentioned at the start is still true. Everything we do is community centered. We are a community, we are friends, we support each other. And if you would like to be part of something really exciting and that network for change, then please do get in touch. We are always looking for individuals to help us further overcome those geographical barriers. I like to think at some point soon we'll be able to physically meet up and to have those picnics that we've been promising each other for the past year, and those opportunities to really connect on a deeper level face to face, as well as through these empowering webinars. Thank you, every single one of you that have attended today, and to those of you that have had that bravery and that strength to share your messages, to reflect on what you have done, and to be able to shine a light on the importance of choosing to change. If you would like to hear from more of the voices within our community, we do in fact at Women Ed have 2 books that have now been published. I've just put the link to purchase those in the chat. They are amazing. I've certainly bought them for our school, for our CPD library, because there's just some amazing messages there. And so if you're feeling enriched and want to go away and hear more, then please do so. But do get in touch, do reach out, and have an amazing and empowering International Women's Day. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.